Hey Axis and Allies players, the good captain here, and welcome to the semi-final video of this game of East and West, played against a human opponent. After sending the completed Soviet turn 6 to my opponent, he studied the board and then sent me his concession. For my part, I don't have too much to say, and for his part, I know that he spoke about the Suez Canal being closed as at least part of the reason for offering a concession. Of course, I accepted as a general rule. I 99% of the time accept the concessions when opponents offer them. But this is not the final video in this series or game of East and West. He and I have actually decided to do, or attempt to do, an audio recording. It might be more like a podcast, or at least a recorded back and forth conversation. We'll discuss the game in general, and then of course discuss these games that we just played. But he and I have now played apparently 14 games. I didn't realize that. So anybody interested in East and West, that audio should drop in the next few days, and I'll post it to this this channel. And this for me will be the first time I'm doing anything like this. I think I got the audio situation worked out, and if I can, I might even include a video, but no promises. I don't. Again, I've said this on other points in my channel. I'm a player first and foremost. I really don't. Running a YouTube channel or organizing this kind of for this kind of stuff is a far secondary when it comes to actually playing. I'd always rather be throwing dice against a human opponent or with a human opponent. I will say this was by far the most competitive game in my opinion. I was very uncertain after turn 2 or 3, or once I realized that the Pakistan defense remained and hadn't uprooted, and my opponent was essentially accepting a 20% chance of a win. I think it was somewhere around the low or mid 80s that the Soviets would win that. But I thought I could get a better deal, and I still think that was wrong-headed. I probably should have positioned more assets at that point in time. Here, I'll even scroll it back. That to me was a huge learning experience. I think the Soviet player, I don't know. I still don't have a position on what is best in this game or any of that. But maybe he and I will develop some of that in our conversation that will be hopefully will be posted here in the next few days. But I'm going to look for the relevant turn now. I think here it is. US 2 is finished, and here we are. Soviet 3, right? This was the critical turn. I probably, if I went back in time right now, I get that my opponent conceded and I accepted, but it was to me it was such a narrow win for the Soviets that if I rewound the clock without knowing the end result anyway, I would have absolutely gone for this, or geared it up, put it into a better position, relocated more assets to add in, this pair of fighters here, for example, or I don't know what else. 1, 2, 3. Look, this fighter can't even reach. This fighter, well, that fighter can, but these 3 fighters are out of position to assist. Arguably, this armor out of position. There's other assets that we could have brought down. And I could have done a better job gaining position. This is really impressive, and I think a Soviet player should be leery of this. Was an ulcer for the Soviets. You know, the nuke was critical. Yeah, I agree, and I'm sure again we'll talk more about this. But that nuclear warhead going off in Western Germany that caused the canal to close, that I still think I think the reaction was done well. Actually, having Turkey pried open every turn was painful. As the Soviets, I can attest to that, and the difficulty of the situation in the middle of the board and solving it. And my solution eventually, very slow to react to this, but my solution was like, oh my God, we might lose this thing. We got to do something. So the something I was doing was rotating this clockwise, rotating the main body into China so that we could split from Xinjiang. We can split our attack. I do have a feeling that when NATO rolls for diplomacy, the first diplomatic breakthrough should be China. There's just so many implications to me. This is my opinion. Okay, I'm not. This is not a hill I'm going to die on. I can have my mind changed, but there's so many second and third order effects of China going neutral. Essentially, not only do you essentially rip 4 IPCs away from the Russians, which is no small amount. That's right, 2 infantry a turn. But you deny them the 6 that are guarding North Korea. Again, that's no small thing. And lastly, you deny them the use of the blue territories. That's a pretty big deal. I mean, Soviet units in there cannot be attacked, and they can attack. So strategically, to me, it's I don't know. I haven't run a game where that wasn't the first diplomatic breakthrough I made. But Spain is tantalizing, and I can empathize with my opponent. That was, integral to the strategy of shucking Americans into Western Europe. At least the strategy. This is the first time I've seen I think this is the first time I've seen a dedicated shuck in this way. So yeah, this is how we ended up. I think if I was going to have a last note preparatory to actually having this podcast conversation thing that hopefully is interesting, it would be that as a Soviet player, I mean, the nuclear warheads, even though they work exactly the same, I feel like in this game the implications are different. So with the Soviets, the target, to me, the obvious target is not ground troops, it's naval units. And the game designers saw fit to provide the NATO with plenty of them. But if you stay concentrated, you can actually absorb a handful of nukes, at least before the nuke turns into a 10-piece killer. While it's a 5-piece killer, you can absorb several of those things if you're grouped up into 1 or 2 big fleets. But broken into small packets, it's a lot harder to absorb. But as the Soviet player, it's incredibly brutal to have to sacrifice essentially the opportunity cost is 10 infantry. And so I felt and feel heavily incentivized as the Soviet player not to use the nuke. Excuse me, but to merely use it as a sword of Damocles. Like at any moment I might drop this, and of course I absolutely would if the opportunity was juicy enough. And Ukraine to me seemed it has to be paired with the bomber or it's a zero threat. That's why another thing I'm hard on with East and West. This Soviet bomber to me is the most valuable piece of any game of Axis and Allies ever. Even though this is a third-party variant, when I compare it to the Canon series games, I can think of no piece that is more valuable than this thing right here for exactly this reason. The loss of this bomber on a strategic bombing run or in any situation where it could be wiped out is just not worth it, and that's again my opinion. I could have it changed, but that one appears to me to be the most clear point to me. Very valuable piece, and I have to pair it with the nuke. Because I'm not guaranteed. The Soviets start out with no breakthrough on this nuclear weapons chart, and obviously there's some difficulty. It took me 6 turns to get it. Statistically improbable, but that can happen. So what are the odds of getting the ballistic missile launcher, which relieves the bomber of that responsibility? It's not far from a guarantee. So the Soviets and the bomber with the nuke kind of all go hand in hand. But building them is so expensive, yeah, I wasn't really thinking of building one, using this or building one the next turn. At least I didn't want to. I'm encouraged to not to unless the target is juicy enough. In contrast, when it comes to NATO, I'm hesitant to use the nuke for different reasons, and it's because of its lack of effectiveness. A nuke is 20 IPCs, and when you're using it against Soviet armies, you are destroying 5 infantry most of the time. If the Soviet player has done their job and their due diligence, the nuke should be absorbed by 10 IPCs worth of infantry. In other words, you destroy a 20 IPC unit to destroy. The Russians will knock off 20 IPCs worth of NATO unit value for the loss of 10 IPCs of Soviet unit value. So in my mind, as the NATO player, I don't like to use it unless I get some other benefit out of it. I.e., I'm neutering the counterattack potential of my enemy on a rear. Use it to bomb the rear area, the rear hinterland of my opponent, and nullify some counterattack with some other thing happening at the front line, and or to use it to stun the fighters. As we saw in this game, you freeze the fighters in place, and that can be interesting and critical even sometimes. Otherwise, there's just a higher probability that the nuke doesn't work for whatever reason. There's a greater than 50-50 chance that the NATO player has something bad happen when he uses the nuke. That's not the same as the Soviets. The Soviets can get away with something bad happening 45% of the time, right? So these are, I guess, a difference of 45% chance it goes off without a hitch as the NATO versus 55% chance it goes off without a hitch as the USSR. I don't know. These are the things. I'm always thinking about all of this stuff before I make a decision with that, and the implications. The implications are, well, like I said, I didn't even know that was a thing. So again, kudos to my opponent. Definitely earned an attaboy on that one. So yeah, that can happen. China can be pushed further in. You could give the Soviets a boost of 4 IPCs every turn when it moves to 8, right? Or this one's the most useless one, like South American. Like it's not a big deal. I mean, the most that happens is the Russians drop a bomb and it pisses off the South Americans, and then it hands 3 IPCs to the Americans every turn. Kind of meh. And then there's global outrage where all the pips, move, all the bad things happen. And there's other bad things that can happen. Detonation and being the worst, a dud being the next worst thing. Campus protests, which means you can't use it when you thought you could, and you have to come back next turn to try again. Anyway, I'm blathering right now, so I'm going to cut it here. We'll just pick it up in the back and forth that we're going to have. Again, that will drop here in the next 3 to 5 days. Thanks for watching this. Check out the next video and to hear the discussion / other side of these games. All the best from the good captain, and bye-bye.